This is Carolina This Week. Carolina This Week with Tim McGinnis.
The election is going to be just before you know it. November 6th is fast approaching. Not only do we have congressional races, we have some races up in the PD to determine who's going to be mayor of one of the biggest cities in our area. Joining me this morning is Mayor Stephen Wukela of Florence, who is seeking his second term against Republican challenger Stephen Powers. Thanks for being with me this morning.
Thank you for having me here.
I want to start off by talking to you about what would you consider your crowning achievements of your first term, and what do you want to get done in your second term?
Sure. There have been a number of achievements, particular projects. The crime rate's gone down. We've done some stuff with public safety, a new fire station. But I think the biggest achievement is the tone that we've set in Florence. In national politics, anger and vitriol has kind of consumed politics more than really any time in our history. In Florence, we've tried to tone down the rhetoric. The negative has not been so amplified as to distort reality, and we found that we can work together and really achieve some of our important goals. And we've done that in a bipartisan way. We hired in our first budget 15 new police officers, which decreased the juvenile crime rate by about 38% in the city. Built a new fire station, which protected lives and families at the same time avoiding an increase in our homeowners insurance premiums. We've made significant strides downtown with some new projects downtown. Oakland Avenue is a major infrastructure need in the north side of town, which we've been able to accomplish. And those have only been possible through bipartisan cooperation. And so I think that tone is the most important achievement.
And you talk about working together as a council. However, your challenger in the primary was a city council member,
Sure.
and your challenge in the general election is a city council member.
Right.
And that challenger in the mayoral election, he said in a published report recently that you have actually divided members of council, and you like to work with a divided council, not with a unified council.
Well, actually, unfortunately, that's another case of, I think, politics getting in the way of real governing. If you look back at the votes, the truth is that our votes have traditionally been overwhelmingly unanimous, and actually those that have been divided along a 5-2 margin, with those two individuals you have mentioned being in the minority. But let's point to some examples of this bipartisan cooperation. Senator Leatherman, for example, is a very conservative member of the Senate from my area. And we were able to work together, even though I'm from a much different political background. We're able to work together and to get Oakland Avenue repaired and the drainage repaired and repaved for the first time in decades. This is some $800,000 project that a very staunch Republican and a staunch Democrat were able to come together and achieve by setting aside politics and achieving what was necessary for the community. Now, there are those, both on the right and the left, as you've pointed out, who would like to amplify the negative and distort reality, but I think what's important is cooperation and moving forward in the community.
Infrastructure is something I know that's very important. You mentioned the Oakland Avenue project.
Absolutely. I've
visited Florence a few times, been in some Christmas parades where we go down and go right through the middle of downtown.
Right.
And I know that there's a lot of work going on to revitalize things
Sure.
in downtown Florence. Do you hope to continue that? What kind of things would you like to see happen?
It's critically important that we continue that, and the progress that we've been able to make so far is precisely through that kind of cooperation that I've talked about. We've built some $75+ million worth of investment in downtown Florence so far. A new library, a new little theater, a new performing arts center, a new museum is coming up to the tune of about $12 million. But those have all been governmental investments. And now, while those are very important to set the stage for development downtown, the next important piece is private investment. And we've had the first step of that with the new hotel and restaurant project downtown. Now, that's about a $6 million investment. Developers have come in and through the help of the city have been able to make this project a reality. That's the first significant investment on Evans Street in downtown Florence since I've been born. And it's a huge achievement. And again, it's only possible because these disparate backgrounds, the county, the Bruce and Lee Foundation in Florence, the university, the city, have been able to cooperate together and achieve what's important.
You mentioned that the property taxes are low, among the lowest in the state. I think second lowest.
The lowest in the state.
Lower than Anderson then? Okay.
That's right.
How is the city going to depend on getting revenue then moving forward if taxes continue to go down? Because Last time I checked, the economy is pretty tough out there.
Well, that's quite right. And let me explain how these taxes are calculated. We have a property tax assessment in the city of Florence. And we assessed, say for a $100,000 piece of residential property, a tax that's about $230 for that size piece of property. But then what we do is we offset that tax with revenue that we collect from sales tax. Now, the vast majority of those revenues come from folks who are coming off the highway or from outside the county and the city. And we take those sales tax revenues and we offset the local property tax. Now, last week I announced that as a result of that offset, the property tax on that $100,000 piece of property is not $230. In fact, it's not the $40 that it previously was with the offset, but is now down to $20 for a $100,000 piece of property, which is in fact, or strike that, $22 to be precise, which is in fact the lowest in the state. 10 times lower than the next lowest, which is Columbia, more than 10 times lower than Myrtle Beach, and almost 20 times lower than Spartanburg and Greenville.
But is taking that revenue to offset the property sales tax going to mean you need to make up for it someplace else so you can have the money to keep the city running?
Well, you know, that's not to say that there aren't revenues that we need to collect and may need to collect in the future. For example, I proposed that we build a $7 million city gym to get young people off the street and give them activities. That was going to require a millage increase. But that millage increase, even for a $7 million facility, would be in the neighborhood of about $7 a year on a $100,000 piece of property. Now, although, as you point out, those kind of revenues may be necessary for those kinds of projects, I think $7 a year on a $100,000 piece of property is not too much to ask, particularly when you're only looking at a tax burden that's $22 on that same piece of property.
All right. I want to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll give you a chance to make an appeal to the voters out there, and I also want to talk a little bit about crime.
Absolutely.
Okay. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Carolina This Week. Mayor Stephen Wukela of Florence, who is running for re-election for a second term against Republican Steve Powers, who will be on later in this show. I want to talk to you now about crime in the city of Florence. And just as somebody who is an observer of what happens up there, it seems like the perception is that the crime rate may be a little bit up. How will you combat that moving into your second term? Well,
when I was elected, we had the 5th highest crime rate per capita in the country, ahead of places like Oakland Avenue and other places that are notorious for significant amounts of crime. I combated that in my first budget by hiring 15 new police officers. And the chief of police organized those officers into a community action team that focused particularly on juvenile crime. And doing as much to divert young people from criminal activity as to enforce the law. We've had great success with that. In fact, we've shown a 38% decrease in juvenile crime since I took the office of mayor. And I think we can continue that pattern of affecting particularly juvenile crime through this increased police power, but a focused presence that concentrates on diverting particularly young people from crime. Downtown is another good example. There is a perception of crime downtown before we revitalize it that's really not very accurate. You're much more likely to be a victim of crime other places in the city than downtown. But the perception of reality can be reality. So we have taken very important steps. We've put police officers on the beat, walking the streets downtown, new cameras downtown, and a focus on security downtown, including a new police substation downtown to affect that perception, which is as important sometimes as the reality.
You're a Democrat civic leader, municipal leader in this state, which does not, you're a rare breed. How is that affecting your dealings? Now, you mentioned the Oakland Avenue project with Senator Leatherman, but looking at other projects where you need to deal with state leaders who are not maybe of your political ilk, how are you able to work through your political divide? Look, that's critically important. Perhaps that's one of the most important things I've been able to accomplish. And what we found is we don't talk about national politics. That has become divisive and negative and vitriolic. We avoid those issues. We talk about what we can change and what we can affect. And I have found that the leaders of the Republican Party in Florence, including Senator Leatherman and others, my mayor pro tem is a very staunch conservative Republican, Mr. Buddy Brand, Councilman Buddy Brand. And we found that we don't talk about national politics. We focus on the community and what we can do and what we can change to improve the community. And they are very good people. They're very decent people and honest people. And we learned that, you know, we don't have to hate each other to disagree with one another.
our disagreements are important. We should sound them out, and then we should find the way to move forward and achieve what needs to be achieved.
One thing, if we look back on a second Wukela term, what would you want the one thing that we look back on to be the highlight?
Well, I think exactly that. I think changing the tenor of politics in this community and pointing out that folks of different political backgrounds and political belief can move forward and can change downtown, can change the crime rate, can change public safety with a fire station, and can fundamentally create a community that is favorable to live in and that has, although vivacious debate, decent debate, and progress moving forward.
All right. With about a minute left, I'll let you look at that camera over here and
right.
Just tell people why you should get their vote.
Well, thank you very much, Tim, and thank you for having me here. When I was elected 4 years ago, the city of Florence was confronted with very serious challenges. We had the greatest financial collapse since the Great Depression. We had a crime rate that was per capita 5th in the nation. We had a fire station inadequacy that led to the danger of our homeowners insurance premiums going up and the danger to our safety and our families going up. In those 4 years, we've been able to tackle each of those problems. We found that by hiring 15 new police officers and creating a community action team, we've been able to decrease the juvenile crime rate by 38%. We found that by committing to a budget that hires new firemen and builds a new fire station, we avoided the increase in homeowners insurance premiums and protected our lives and family. We found that by working together, we can commit to creating a downtown that's attractive and that's good for the economy. We've been able to do these things by avoiding the vitriol and the anger that we have found in national politics and deciding instead to work together in spite of differences in political backgrounds towards the improvement of our community. I think that's what my administration has stood for, and that's what you can expect to see from 4 more years of Wukela administration. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for coming down. Time now to talk to your opponent.
Excellent.